Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Ina McBride, and I am your worship associate this morning. And I'm part of a team that is working to bring this service to you wherever you might be. We welcome you to our worship service this morning. We're glad to have you with us today, whether you're joining us in person or virtually, or whether you're here for the first time, or whether you've been here so many times you can't remember. I hope to get to that point. Here at Community, we welcome people of all faiths and of no faith in particular. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome here. Today, we are privileged to have with us our guest speaker, Reverend Lora Brandis. Reverend Brandis is the grandmother of 2-year-old twins. It's a lot of work. She is an on-call hospital chaplain and part-time Faith Forward coordinator for First Unitarian Church of Dallas. She is currently enrolled in Spiritual Direction, Formation, and Certification Program of Meadville Lombard Theological School's Leadership Institute of Growth, Healing, and Transformation. Now repeat that back to me. You didn't get it? Okay. She previously served congregations in Utah, Idaho, and California. Most recently, she was the settled minister for Horizon, our friends at Horizon UU in Carrollton, from 2016 to 2021. Please welcome Reverend Lora Brandis.
Good morning. Sikh activist and lawyer Valerie Kaur burst into American consciousness in the wake of the 2016 election, when her watch night service address went viral with 40+ million views worldwide. I was one of those 40+ million who was taken by her question. Is this the darkness of the tomb or the darkness of the womb? I watched the viral video as a Sikh woman proclaimed the metaphor that would redefine a political moment in the United States of America. It was December 31st. Christians had just celebrated the birth of God as a baby, emerging from the darkness of his mother's womb. America, some of America, was stunned by the outcome of the recent election. Sikhs and Muslims were targets of violence, told to go back where they came from. Valerie Kaur gave an address during the late night service at the Metropolitan AME Church in Washington, D.C. Well-known faith leaders stood beside her, including the Reverend James Forbes of Riverside Church in New York City, Imam Talib al-Rashid from Harlem, and the Reverend Dr. William Barber, leader of the Poor People's Campaign. Valerie Kaur stood with these men and told us all to breathe. Valerie Kaur stood with these men and redefined a political moment as only a mother could do. She used the language of childbirth to reassure and inspire. She used the language of childbirth to ask, what if the story of America is one long labor? What if our ancestors were whispering in our ears like a midwife, telling us to breathe and then push? To birth this new America, we will need revolutionary love. Motivated by being one of the 40+ million who had seen Valerie Kaur's viral video, I signed up to see her in person at the 14th Annual Revolutionary Love Conference, to be held in 2020 at the end of April in Washington, D.C. I had been hearing about this conference for years from my colleagues. It is usually held in New York City, where it was founded at the Middle Collegiate Church. This year would be different. It was the year leading up to the November 2020 elections, and the plan was to gather in D.C. at All Souls Unitarian Church with activists, artists, and thought leaders to create strategies designed to hold our elected officials accountable for the state of our union. In D.C., I had a couch to sleep on. I was going until the pandemic. I still attended the conference, but I attended seated at my desk at home. This time, Valerie Kaur sat outside on the porch of her home, where she was sheltering in place, and told us there would be no going back, only forward into the unknown. She told us about the 1,500 incidents of racism and discrimination related to COVID-19 that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders across the United States had experienced since the beginning of the pandemic. The pandemic was new, she said. The pattern was not. She quoted Indian author and activist Arundhati Roy, who said, "The coronavirus is a gift to authoritarian states, including India. Pre-corona, if we were sleepwalking into the surveillance state, now we are panic running into a super surveillance state." Valerie Kaur also said reassuringly, in the context of her Sikh faith, that there is a unity of humanity. There is hope in the knowledge that we cannot take a linear view of history. We can better understand history when we understand the progress during birthing labor. Sometimes labor abruptly stops. Sometimes we must wait before it is time to push. Sometimes all we can do is breathe through the pain. Like the body in labor that remembers an ancestral memory of all mothers who have given birth, all of humanity has an ancestral memory of love. Not love that is a mere rush of feelings, but revolutionary love that calls us to be each other's midwives in the work required to birth a new America. Labor is hard work, she said. Labor is bloody work, she said. Now, several years later, post-pandemic, post-2020 election, pre-2024 election, I wonder at this metaphor Valerie Kaur gave us. Are we tired of the labor? Are we like the mother who has labored long into the night yelling, "I can't do it. I'm too tired. I can't push"? Or maybe we're calling for drugs to help ease the pain of the labor. Maybe we just want to do the rest of this a little numbed out, a little on automatic pilot. The metaphor breaks down at some point, of course. I do know this many years later. We're not done giving birth to the America we were promised. we will probably not be done in my lifetime, or maybe even in my grandchildren's lifetime. That doesn't mean we stop. On Friday, January 12th, just a few weeks ago, a woman and 2 children drowned in the Rio Grande that marks the border between the U.S. and Mexico near Eagle Pass, Texas. U.S. Border Patrol agents knew that a group of 6 migrants were in distress in the river, but their access was blocked by the Texas National Guard and the Texas Military Department. The presence of these armed soldiers is the result of SB 4, a law Governor Abbott signed to attempt to take into state hands the power over immigration the Constitution gives to the federal government. I will tell you, I've been preaching about our broken immigration system since I became a minister, which, as a second career minister, is not that long, but long enough that you would think I would have experienced more change, some movement towards progress. I am aware that this is a very complex issue, one that I'm not going to unpack in one sermon. I am also aware that Unitarian Universalists do not speak in one voice on this issue, as we rarely do about most issues. I have seen people change their opinions after they study the issue more in depth, and I urge you, of course, to do this. I urge you to consider how a religion that professes love as its central teaching ought to respond to the deaths of a woman and 2 children at our state's border with Mexico. Black feminist Bell Hooks, writing in her book All About Love, New Visions, Love Song to the Nation, said, "Those of us who have already chosen to embrace a love ethic, allowing it to govern and inform how we think and act, know that when we let our light shine, we draw to us, are drawn to other bearers of the light. We are not alone. We are not alone. And with reminders all around us of those who have not chosen to embrace a love ethic, we will need each other for the labor ahead." 10 years ago, I was arrested for civil disobedience in Washington, D.C. More than 100 faith leaders and immigrant activists were arrested with me as we called on President Obama to stop deportations immediately and to care for children at the border. Wrong president, you're thinking. No. Our system has been broken for a long time. During the action, I stood next to Antonio, a man from El Salvador. The risk I took was small compared to Antonio's. As an undocumented, aspiring American married to an American citizen and raising 2 American citizen children, Antonio's participation was more courageous than mine. Luckily, the entire arrest and charge had been negotiated beforehand. We were all let go after paying a fine of only $50. Now, I think the way we protest in this country now is hopefully less performative, but it can also be more dangerous. It shouldn't stop us, but we should understand what risks we are willing to take. I didn't go to Washington, D.C. just to be arrested. I went to attend the Pray for Relief, Not One More Family Separated Summit, which included worshiping with Unitarian Universalists at the Universalist National Memorial Church, attending trainings with 70 interfaith leaders from around the nation, and marching behind the yellow Side of Love banner in the Not One More protest on the last day of our gathering. Unitarian Universalists marched alongside undocumented people carrying the banners of Not One More Deportation and Deferred Action for All. Those two banners were raised by pole climbers at Freedom Plaza in a bolder and riskier act of civil disobedience than the one I participated in earlier in the week. We gathered Saturday morning across the street from the Smithsonian. The march took us past the Immigration and Customs Enforcement building to Freedom Plaza, where we watched two people climb very tall flagpoles and hang the banners. And then we kept watching as they were removed from the poles by the fire department that, of course, used their ladder. And then they were led away by the police. We moved towards the White House, responding to chant leaders with megaphones placed strategically throughout the line. For most of the march, we chanted separately, the back of the line not knowing what the front of the line was shouting. There was one moment right before we got to Freedom Plaza when we paused together in the street, and the chant became the same for the entire line. Not one more. I could hear that we were all together on this one. I could feel the sense of being one body, chanting together, not one more. As a person of faith and a minister, I talk a lot about being one with all of life, one with humanity. It is an intellectual concept that I rarely feel directly. As I chanted with more than 1,200 others on the streets of Washington, I felt it. That sense of being one with all of life, that unitive, transcendent experience that most religions describe. And I was angry. There is an anger that fuels our justice work. If we are honest with ourselves, we will see our own anger in the face of our supposed enemy, and we will feel compassion. The anger I felt that day was anger at the human condition. It was anger at a world that allows war to go on forever and children to die violently. Valerie Kaur writes, "Love as labor can be taught, modeled, and practiced. This labor engages all our emotions. Joy is the gift of love. Grief is the price of love. Anger protects that which is loved. And when we think we have reached our limit, wonder is the act that returns us to love. As our march was winding down that day 10 years ago, we bumped into another protest. This protest was larger than ours. People were carrying flags with black, white, and green stripes and a red triangle. They were shouting, "Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!" Some of the Unitarian Universalists from our protest joined in. Some did not. Immigration and a free Palestinian state are equally divisive issues. Issues that on the surface seem to ask us to take sides. But this is not an issue-based sermon. It's a love-based sermon. Just as we are not an issues-centered religion, we are a love-centered religion. Not hearts and flowers, sentimental love. Love for self, love for our enemies, love for our neighbor. Revolutionary love, the kind that can only be practiced in community. May it be so, and amen.